This is the Andy Pollin Hour on Washington's new home for sports. ESPN 630, the sports capital.
All right, we have a Tony show today. Last Tony show of the week. In fact, I think he's taking off Monday as well next week. So 2 hours of me tomorrow, Friday, and Monday, if you're making your scheduling plans as such. Gosh. Commanders are open. Training camp has opened up, and Ron Rivera talked yesterday to the media, and we'll play some of the highlights of that coming up in about 20 minutes, go through what he said. At one point, and I want you to hear this, he went on, I wouldn't say a rant, but he went on a lengthy answer about a question of what's going on off the field spilling over to what's on the field. And I thought it was quite revealing. That's coming up in about 20 minutes. As I say, camp open up today. I've been to a number of these over the years, whether it was in Carlisle, which I think most people who think nostalgically about the organization think about going to training camp in Carlisle, which is where they were for many, many, many years. And then when they made the deal to build FedEx Field, they wanted to have a training camp in Maryland, since the stadium is in Maryland. I don't know what was involved in all of that, but in the mid-'90s, they went to Frostburg, and they were there for a short period of time, maybe 5 years or so. And you remember this, and this this is yet another disaster from Dan Snyder. In the year 2000, his first full year as owner, remember he bought the team in May of 1999, so he didn't have time to really futz with anything except that he fired Charlie Casserly a week before training camp. But in terms of whether he could make a deal for a camp or whether he was making deals for players, that was all done by the time he came aboard. The only thing he could do was fire the coach or fire the GM. He chose to fire the GM. So anyway, 2000, he decides, okay, I got all these stars. I got Deion Sanders. I got Bruce Smith. I got Jeff George. People are going to want to see this football team, and I'm going to charge for training camp. Now, nobody really done that before. You can charge for, I guess you can charge for parking, although I don't know if any teams did. But anyway, there was a charge to get in, and this was a big controversy around the league. It didn't seem like that big a deal to me, but later I found out it was, because here's the deal. When you charge for training camp, you're allowed then to, if you're another team, pay a scout to go in and watch. If it's free, I guess it's some kind of an agreement between the teams, but if it's free, the scouts from other teams aren't allowed to attend. So I was later told by Mark Carrier, who was another free agent on that team, that the defense couldn't practice certain things because they knew that scouts were in the stands at training camp, which was in Ashburn. And Dan Snyder didn't make the kind of money that he thought he was going to make. And then, of course, he fired Norv Turner before the end of the season. He hired Marty Schottenheimer, and Marty said, no, we're not going to have this dog and pony show in Ashburn. So they go back to Carlisle. They go to Carlisle for the Marty year. And then the following year, in 2002, Steve Spurrier is the coach. Marty lasts 1 year. And I'll never forget this. Spurrier opens up training camp back in Carlisle in 2002, and he says, well, I don't know what we're doing here. Got much better facilities out in Ashburn. Doesn't make any sense to me. Sure enough, they're back the next year in Ashburn, which lasted for, I guess, it was close to 10 years. And then Joe Gibbs, I guess. Did Joe Gibbs? Maybe Joe Gibbs went back to Carlisle. I forget. But anyway, they made the deal with Richmond after RG3's year in 2012. That turned out to be a disaster. And they did make one more trip to Richmond last year, paid to go there. It didn't make financial sense to go back, so they're in Ashburn now for the next few weeks. Now, if you want to go out and watch practice, you're kind of out of luck here, and much like everything else they do, they did this in a ham-handed, sloppy way, and there will be fans there, but not as many fans as they were able to have back in 2000 because they've changed the configuration of the park. There's been some new buildings built. They put up the practice bubble, so there's not as much room, and it's unclear as to how many fans can actually attend the training camp in Ashburn. But Matthew Paris has a story in the Washington Times today about how much of a mess this was. Not surprisingly, because everything they do seems to be a mess, but how much of a mess it was for fans who wanted to attend training camp to do so. Now, the Ravens, they practice at their own facility, which is in Owings Mills, and they have 16 sessions, and they said to the fan base, okay, here's the day that these sessions are going to open up online, and you can get tickets to this if you go to this website at this particular time. And they capped the 16 sessions at 1,000 fans per day. So I guess, I don't think you can register for more than one training camp day. So essentially 16,000 Ravens fans will get to attend practice. Nice and neat. This went online. The tickets were all scooped up in 4 minutes. They're done with it. No. Does Washington look at this and say, yeah, that's the way to do it? No, they don't. They gave fans until July 13th, Paris writes, to sign up in advance for tickets, and even then, a spot wasn't guaranteed. Those who entered the lottery had to pick from 8 dates for the sessions being held at team headquarters in Ashburn after years of training camp in Richmond. So they essentially enter this lottery by registering before July 13th. And from that lottery, fans are chosen to attend whatever's on their list from the 8 dates. I guess you could rank them in order as to what you wanted. I don't know how it worked, but they quote a fan named Tony Brula, lifelong fan who lives in Manassas. I have never gone through a lottery to get an opportunity to go to training camp. I put my name in and didn't get in. It's like another shot to the fans after all we've been through with this franchise. Absolutely right. Absolutely right. If he doesn't get in on what the Ravens did, if it's similar to what they set up, well, that's on him. Okay, so he didn't get in line online fast enough to make that happen. But to get in this Meshuggah lottery and hope that your name comes up, says here only 6 teams this season chose to go on the road for camp, meaning 81% of the league stayed home, according to the NFL. That's a sharp increase from 10 years ago when 59% of the league stayed home. In 2022, of the league's 31 teams traveled. I mean, it used to be that what they did with training camp was it was a way to get everybody away from everything. And when they trained in Carlisle, it wasn't fun. And going back to the days of like the 1960s, training camp was a whole lot different than it is now. They had 14 games on the schedule, and you played 6, count them, 6 exhibition games, not like today where they play 3. And training camp would start kind of like after the 4th of July. It wasn't long after that. They'd go all through July, halfway through August, finally would break camp after that and get ready for the season, which didn't start until mid-September. I mean, it was a long slog, mainly because guys had to get in shape. Now they're expected to be in shape year-round. In those days, they had to have off-season jobs, so they couldn't be in the kind of football shape that they needed to be in. So they'd have you go through all these drills and conditioning practices and so forth to get you ready for the season. So they thought it was a good idea. And they made money off these exhibition games, and so the owners weren't complaining about that, but of course the players were, but they had no leverage there. As for how unusual this lottery system is, Paris points out that of the 29 teams that plan to host fans for camp this year, the Houston Texans are the only team besides the Commanders that implement that type of setup to claim tickets. The Bears used the lottery system last year, but switched back to a first-come, first-served format this year, which makes a lot of sense. They also had it available for season ticket holders. Now, make your own jokes there, but it seems they hardly have any season ticket holders, although Jason Wright, the team president, keeps saying they've gone up 80%. But yeah, I think that makes sense. I mean, they're dying to have people buy season tickets, so yes, give them first come, first served basis on going to training camp. I understand that. Here is the explanation from Jason Wright, the team president. And I like him. I think he's a smart guy, and I think he's doing the best job that he can. But because of the chaos that goes on in this organization all the time, it's one botched thing after another, including this. So this was his explanation to the Washington Times as to the way they did this lottery system. And he said the team was committed to, quote, delivering a personal and interactive experience to fans, but also providing the coaching staff and players a chance to get into rhythm for camp. We will continue to engage all of our fans to ensure they have every opportunity to watch the team gear up for the inaugural season as the Commanders. So he says there's method behind this madness, but again, it's just another thing where you say to the fans, you know, you're part of our marketing machine here, and we're trying the best we can to do this. But again, everything they do seems to turn to dung. I mean, it's just a mess. It's just an absolute mess. And putting fans through this lottery system to go, I mean, it's, you know, you're standing out there. It's 100 degrees. You're watching guys hit dummies and sleds. You know, I think you ought to be paid to do that. The times I've gone, I've been paid. You know, we used to do radio shows out there, and that was part of the deal. That was part of my job, to go out there and watch a little practice and talk to some players and yuck it up and things like that. That was the job. So the people who are entering a lottery, hoping their name comes up, to sit out and schwitz for hours watching guys hit tackling dummies, well, as we say in our business, geigesind. Best of luck to you. All right, the Juan Soto situation. What's today? Today is the 27th of July, so we're 6 days away from the trade deadline, which is 6 o'clock on Tuesday. And as this has ramped up after the news broke, just a week and a half ago? It was a Saturday afternoon that Kenny Rosenthal put out that Juan Soto had rejected the 15-year, $440 million offer from the team. And it went from, well, is there another offer coming? Are they going to continue to negotiate in the offseason, to now an almost certainty that he will be dealt before Tuesday? Tom Verducci lays it all out at SI.com, and he lays it out by numbers. First of all, number one, he says Washington has no chance of signing him to an extension. Soto will be 26 years old when he's eligible for free agency after the 2024 season. His agent, Scott Boras, knows nothing is more valuable than an elite player hitting free agency at such a young age. So it really doesn't matter what they offer. They're waiting. They're going to sit and they're going to wait. So in terms of keeping him long-term, and by long-term I mean 2 seasons after this, where they're still going to be in this rebuilding phase, it makes no sense. So that's number one, why Soto is going to be traded. Number two, he says the Nationals are the worst team in baseball with one of the worst farm systems. Now, before you blame ownership on that, I would just defend the farm system situation this way. They have not, over a 10-year period, now the last 2 years, they were still hoping that they had enough left in the tank to be a contender again. But going back to 2012, when they won their first division title, which is now a 10-year period, they have not been sellers at the deadline. They have been buyers in some cases. So it's, to me, understandable why the farm system is depleted. Number three, the team is being sold. Verducci says there's no way Soto is committing his prime years to a franchise in which the owner and direction is unknown. Moreover, just about every owner does not want the headache and PR hit of having to trade the team's best player immediately after buying the team. An unnamed executive said they prefer to have the problem removed. Number four, Soto's value immediately goes down after August 3rd. And the obvious reason there is that's one less year of team control. So if you trade for him now, you get him for 3 years or 3 pennant races. And even if you don't plan on giving him what is likely to be a contract north of $500 million, you still have 3 shots at winning a championship. And if you think you're one player away, he could be that guy. Number five, the interest in Soto is off the charts, says Verducci. In addition to the trade package, Soto will cost the team about $5.3 million for the remainder of this season and about $55 million for the final 2 years of arbitration seasons. The Twins are paying Carlos Correa $81 million over the same 2.5 years. Every team with the hope of winning the World Series in his 3-year window must be in on Soto, including the Guardians and the Rays. Now, you wouldn't think of Cleveland and Tampa, but he said that the pool is that deep that those two teams who have not won, World Series, Tampa's never won one, and Cleveland, 1948? The last time they won a World Series, they've been in a couple of them since, but have not won. So they could be in on this, knowing that he's going to walk after 2.5 years, but that's 2.5 years where you can contend. Also, he says the Cardinals have the most major league ready young talent to trade. They're a high contender in this. And he says Soto is too good and the field is too crowded for Mike Rizzo to make this deal without getting the club's number one prospect. It will also take 4 other elite prospects, or 3 if a team is willing to take on what's left of Patrick Corbin's contract, and that's about $67 million. Corbin's on the mound today in Los Angeles. Incredibly, as the Nationals go for the sweep. They go into Los Angeles, worst team in baseball. Dodgers have the best record, 11-game home win streak, and the Nats have won 2 in a row. Anyway, here's some comparisons from Verducci on the big blockbuster deals that have been made this century and how they have worked out. And he says the takeaway for buyers, a package of 4 or 5 players, is worth taking a shot at the World Series. For the seller, make sure you get a number one prospect in a package deal, but don't expect to win the deal in which you give up generational talent. So if you're thinking this is going to be a home run for the Nationals in the long term, whatever deal they make, beware, says Verducci. And he gives the first example, Curt Schilling, Philadelphia to Arizona, July of 2000. He was 33 years old. They had him under control for 2 years. And the Diamondbacks did win, in fact, their first and only World Series the following season when Schilling and Randy Johnson were the aces. The price that Arizona gave up to get him, 4 major leaguers, Vincent Padilla, Travis Lee, Nelson Figueroa, Omar Dahl. Was there a number one prospect included? No. And the verdict for the seller, who gave up what turned out to be an elite pitcher in Curt Schilling, Phillies GM Ed Wade, he got burned taking the safer route of major league ready players. None of them had high ceilings. Bartolo Colon traded from Cleveland to Montreal in June of 2002. Now remember this. This wasn't necessarily Montreal trying to contend. Montreal, as has been reported, was going to contract. They were in a decrepit old stadium there, and people weren't going, and baseball was going through a period of time where the TV money wasn't nearly what it is now. So 20 years ago, there was talk they were going to contract, and the feeling was that they would have, before they contracted, as many fans as possible come to the game, and they were going to try and trade for veteran players who would make the team more attractive. So the price that they gave up, that Montreal, this franchise, the now Nationals, gave up in 2002 to get Bartolo Colon, were 3 prospects and a veteran: Grady Sizemore, Brandon Phillips, Cliff Lee, and Lee Stevens. And the verdict for the seller, which, of course, was Cleveland, and then rookie GM Mark Shapiro, who identified 3 future All-Stars. That's a win. Grady Sizemore became a really good player. Cliff Lee became a really good player. Brandon Phillips, a really good player, all-star players. Mark Teixeira, going from Texas to Atlanta, July of 2007. He was 27 years old, still under team control for 2 more years. They did not win the World Series. What they gave up, 4 prospects, the Braves did: Elvis Andrews, Netfali Felice, Matt Harrison, and Jared Saltalamacchia. Saltalamacchia was a number 1 prospect, and that really was a good deal for the Texas Rangers, because John Daniels was the GM. He had the building blocks for the first Rangers team to reach the World Series in 2010, but they have not made it back. They won the pennant the next year as well, but didn't make it back to the World Series since. And also Miguel Cabrera, going from Florida to Detroit in December of 2007. He was under team control for 2 years. He was 24 years old. They did, in fact, go to the World Series, but it took a contract extension for that to happen. The Tigers reached the World Series in 2012, but lost to the Giants. The prospects that were given up, headlined by Cameron Maben and Andrew Miller. They also unloaded Dontrell Willis's contract. It was a bust. The Tigers system was terrible at the time of the trade. Maben had torn up the minors but was overwhelmed in a brief major league trial, while Miller had command issues. Both players eventually found their footing in the big leagues, but not until after the Marlins had traded them away. So net, you can get elite prospects, but chances are this is not going to be a win for the Nationals. Even if Soto maybe even tails off a little bit, even a little bit less of Soto is still one of the great players in the game. So, you just got to swallow hard, watch it happen. But according to Verducci and others, it almost is a foregone conclusion that Juan Soto will be dealt before the trade deadline on Tuesday afternoon. Coming up next, we'll go through the highlights of Ron Rivera's news conference yesterday in Ashburn. It's the Andy Pollin Hour, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Hour on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
We got Tony coming up at 11 o'clock. In just a few minutes, I'm going to get to the debacle that this reworked fight song is, or what they're trying to do, the Commanders organization. I'm sorry, it's still hard for me to get used to saying Commanders. I was in favor of a name change, and it was inevitable that it was going to happen, but just I don't know. It's just it doesn't seem like the team that I rooted for all those years. And they're trying to hang on to that for, I guess, people like me, because the fan base has pretty much abandoned them based on the attendance and the interest and the polls that are done about the team, and they're somehow trying to hang on to the past with this fight song. But God, it's just a mess, and I'll give you my thoughts on that in just a couple minutes. As far as news for training camp opening, and they've been on the field now, I guess, for an hour and a half. I really haven't gone through the tweets carefully, but there'll be some information coming out. And what happens is the reporters are only allowed to see the warm-ups and then the wide receivers going through their routes. So you're going to see things on Twitter, if you follow the beat people, say, the pass was right on the money, and so-and-so intercepted, blah, 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 whatever it was. It's just training camp. They're working out in shorts. Let's wait till we get to the regular season, not even the exhibition season, which is going to start on August 13th. So cool your jets a little bit on that. The news is about the injured players, and Ron Rivera really doesn't like to talk about injuries. In the post-game, he'll say, I have to check with the trainer. When he does his Monday news conference, he says he purposely checks with the trainer after the news conference. So he's not in a position of lying to the reporters. And, of course, you have Tuesday, an off day, so nobody really finds out about injuries until Wednesday. It's whatever gamesmanship he likes to employ. But he did talk about the 4 players who are going to start the season on the physically unable to perform list. The 2 Chases, Chase Young, who suffered a torn ACL in game number 10 last year, and Chase Roulier, the center who broke his leg during the season. Also Logan Thomas, who suffered a very serious knee injury, and Tyler Larson, who's kind of like a swing guy on the offensive line. He's played center, he's played guard. I think he's even played a little bit of tackle. So all 4 of those guys are on the physically unable to perform list, and as you'll hear, Chase Young seems the most likely to stay on it the longest, and I'll have a thought on that coming up. But first, this was about the forecast for the team. I think this was the first question that was asked by John Keim, and again, they're selling quarterback here. This has been an offseason campaign about what a difference Carson Wentz makes. And Rivera says here that when the season ended last year, when they had uncertainty at quarterback, as it didn't look like Fitzgerald was going to play for them anymore, and Fitzpatrick was going to play for them anymore. And so, who was going to be their quarterback? Well, now that they have Carson Wentz, as you'll hear him say, things look a whole lot different.
I know my expectations when we first came out of the regular season from last year, going forward, but now having a quarterback of Carson's stature, Carson's ability, we kind of changed our focus a little bit. So I'm pretty excited to see where we are exactly as a football team now that we'll be in pads. We'll have preseason to gauge some things off of. But I do like where we are. I do like who we are, and I like our potential. Which
leads to the obvious question about what this season is going to be. Now, they have won only 7 games each of the last 2 years. They have been a playoff team, which, they were sort of embarrassed to be, or at least Rivera seemed almost embarrassed to be his first year. But now it's obviously going to take more than 7 wins, you would think, to be a playoff team. So that led to this question.
Is it fair to say it's playoffs or bust? I mean, is that...
No, it's not. It's fair to say we expect to win. And we'll leave it at that.
He was asked about that a little bit later on, why he would say that. He said, we don't want to put any more pressure on ourselves? Well, there's pressure. There should be pressure. This is year 3 under Ron Rivera. And the way the league is set up with the salary cap and the draft and so forth and so on, you ought to be able to build a playoff team in 3 years if you know what you're doing. I know this organization is constantly in turmoil. I know it's a mess. But there should be enough here, and as low as they have finished year after year, there should be enough draft picks that have built up to the point where they're productive players by now. So, there should be pressure. And, it's funny, when Davey Johnson took over the Nationals, it would have been 2011 season. It's the crazy year that Jim Riggleman quit in the middle of the year with the team on a win streak. Davey took over 2011, finished up the season. 2012, everybody thought they were a year away. And Davey said he liked what he saw there, and I think that was the year he said playoffs or bust. He may have said it the following year, but they did make the playoffs in 2012, and that's where he started making comparison to the Mets, which is where he won a World Series in the 80s and so forth. Rivera ain't going there. That's not where he's going. Now, as far as the injured players, the players who are starting the season on what they call the PUP list, the physically unable to perform, I think the one that most people are interested in is Chase Young, who was the number 2 pick of the draft 2 years ago, had a very good second half of his rookie year, was very disappointing in the first half of last year, and tore his ACL in game number 10. And it sounds to me like they're going to play it as safe as possible with him. They got a lot invested in him, and the clock ticks. You have that 4-year contract with a 5th-year option for a draft pick that high, a first-round pick. And they're going to have to start making some decisions on him. But it sounds like there's a possibility it's going to come maybe even way later this season. Or I even say that this is a possibility that it could be all year. We'll see. See what you hear in this answer from Ron Rivera about the timeline for a Chase Young return.
You guys have been really careful about not giving a timeline on Chase Young. Is there something in kind of his rehab that caused? Was there any kind of setback, or is this just kind of expected?
The biggest thing is we don't put timelines on those things. It's unfair. You put pressure on people to try and accomplish that and get to where they're supposed to be before they should be, and it could cause something. But as I said, though, with Chase, and for the most part, all those guys, when they're ready, they'll be back on the football field. But I did say, Chase is, the seriousness of his is there. Again, it's an ACL, and it happened later in the year. And so the expectations, because I do know he said, what he had said, he expected to be there, from the beginning, and that's an unfair expectation.
Okay, so they're playing it, I don't want to say playing it safe, but they're playing it in a way that's somewhat coy. And nowadays an ACL should not be a career-ending injury, but it can still be a career-altering injury. And it's possible that he doesn't have the burst that he had as a rookie. And again, talking about the long-term contract, they don't have to make a decision now, but they will have to make a decision next year about picking up that 5th-year option, which gets really expensive on a first-round draft pick, especially one that was taken number 2 overall. So that's one to keep an eye on. Maybe he makes it back, but doesn't sound like he's going to be there for the opener almost for sure. This was the most interesting part of the news conference, at least for me, yesterday. And remember about a year ago, Alex Smith was on Rich Eisen's show. And Eisen asked him about all the off-the-field turmoil. Does it bleed into the locker room? And Alex Smith said, how could it not? And so he said, yeah, that does seem to be a problem there, and it's continuing to be a problem. As now we still don't know if Dan Snyder is going to testify tomorrow in front of Congress, because Carolyn Maloney, head of the Oversight Committee, wants him to do it under subpoena, and his lawyer says there's no reason to be a subpoena. So I don't know if he's actually going to post. It's scheduled to be 8 o'clock tomorrow morning, but we could find out later today that the whole thing is off, or they could have it even tomorrow morning. They could say, no, it's not happening. That's just part of it. All the things we've been going on now for 2 full years. These Washington Post stories appeared in July of 2020, and it's been nonstop off the field since. This was Rivera asked about that yesterday, and I want you to listen to his answer because he covers a lot of ground here, including some CYA action by him as well, covering himself. And I'll get to one particular comment that he made towards the end of this, about 2.5 minutes of Rivera on the stuff that he deals with off the field and how it spills over into their on-the-field work.
In the 3 years you've been here, every summer there's been, the organization has been in the news. Has that become normal? And I guess, how do you kind of think about that or deal with that as it's going on when you're not here, maybe all the time?
If I'm not here, I ain't worried about it. I'll tell you that right now. It's it's almost to be expected, to be honest with you, and it goes in cycles. It is situation, circumstances, and to use a quote that it is what it is, and I try to make sure it, for us, it's what's interesting versus what's important. And we're back to football, and to me that's the important thing, is it's football. I'm here to be judged on that, okay? And the judgment starts with winning or losing, and that to me is what's important. Does it make what I do harder? Yeah, it really does. Because, and again, all that stuff that's happened, that's important, okay? It is. But to me, as a football coach, okay, what I have to do is I've got to make this team presentable as a football team on the football field and in the community, okay, the players and coaches. And we have to have success. We have to go out and play. Why? Because we need the fans behind us. Fans get behind us, give us support, help build this up, get some momentum going, and some good things can happen. I believe that because I know what this area is capable of in terms of when the team's winning and they get behind them. I remember playing against, Coach Gibbs' teams and just how impactful it is when that stadium's rocking. So that's what we have to do. That's what's important. Okay, and again, I said that other stuff, that's important too, but I don't want to brush it aside. But that constantly, being in the news and people putting in the news makes it hard for what we do. And again, I'm not saying it's not important, okay, because I know somebody's going to say, oh, look, I'm trying to. I am. Because I want to get the fan base back. And I don't want people mixing up what happened back then with what we're trying to do as a football team. Okay? Appreciate us for being the football team, and the other stuff is over there. That's what I'm hoping.
Back then. See, they keep pushing that. Back then. Okay, let's remind Ron Rivera that one of his first hires, Ryan Vermillion, the trainer, is being investigated by the FBI. I don't think he's with the team anymore. Maybe he's on leave, but he ain't the trainer anymore. Also, what was said by Carolyn Maloney, the head of the investigation, the oversight committee into the workplace culture of the organization, she said that Dan Snyder conducted a shadow investigation while this was going on, trying to intimidate witnesses and hiring private investigators. That was under Ron Rivera's watch. So the back then that you keep pushing and you keep trying to say it was all before me. No. Some of it's still happening now. And it's happening while you're pretty much the head of this organization, because it was said when you were hired, it's a coach-centric move. So stop that, okay? Now, I appreciate the honesty. You could say, oh, no, we just get on the field, we concentrate on football. A lot of players say that. So there is some honesty there. But some of this is on your hotel bill, Ron. Remember that. Just remember that. Last thing, this is, again, the whole Carson Wentz, fresh start, new beginning, blah, blah, blah. After two organizations at great cost threw him overboard. Philadelphia Eagles gave him the big contract. They ate a lot of money in dead cap money by trading him to the Colts. The Colts gave up, I think they gave up a number one to get him. They had him for 1 year. They threw him overboard as well. Now he's here, third team, 3 years. This is Rivera on the conversation that he and Wentz had yesterday.
He and I did talk today. We spent a little bit of time together. It was good. It was good. It was good to see him. And I just wanted to reiterate more so than anything else is he was wanted here. And that was one of the first things I told him when he came into the building. When I shook his hand, when he came through the door, I told him, I said, hey, you were wanted here. And I think that's important because, again, when you do some of the research and look at some of the things, if we get the guy that has that type of ability that he's shown in the past, I think it could help us and make us a solid, formidable team to have to play against.
Well, he had been wanted in Philadelphia, number 2 pick of the draft, and he had been wanted in Indianapolis. Frank Reich, his old position coach, wanted him now that he was the head coach in Indianapolis, and both organizations said, get out. So you've been wanted before, Carson. You're wanted here because they're desperate. They haven't had, God, when's the last quarterback that they've had that they could, well, I guess it was Kirk Cousins, but they futzed that up as well and didn't give him a long-term deal, and he walked out of here. So, being wanted, fine, but he's been wanted in the last 2 places and then wasn't wanted anymore. The fight song. I'd heard that they were keeping the fight song and they were going to redo it, but the way that they're doing this, I likened it to a restaurant that used to be near where I worked on Rockville Pike. It's now Matchbox. It's right on the Pike. It's been successful. It's in the Congressional Shopping Center, and I think it's been there for close to 10 years. But prior to that, it was a restaurant graveyard. It was a really nice restaurant inside, but it didn't stay. I think at one time it was Shelley's Wood Roast, then it was sort of an upscale sports bar, and it just didn't work. And each time they changed ownership or changed restaurants, they didn't change the restaurant itself. They just put new signage on it. And maybe that was part of the reason it failed. Matchbox came in, they tore the place down, and they built it like a Matchbox restaurant that they have, franchises. I guess they're all over the country, but they're in several places here in town, and it's been successful. So what they're doing is they're taking a restaurant that failed and just putting a new sign on it and saying, hey, it works. I would go with the new fight song. First of all, Redskins is 2 syllables. Commanders is 3. So hail to the Commanders instead of hail to the Redskins. That doesn't work. They've changed one of the lines that went Sons of Washington to now All of Washington. I guess that's a gender move on their part. Okay. The main change, though, is the third line of the original song, Braves on the Warpath, which obviously had to go. They're giving fans a choice. You can vote for Fight for Our Commanders or Leaders on a Mission. They asked Ron Rivera about that yesterday. He said he voted for or would vote for Leaders on a Mission, but didn't seem fully aware of this. Okay, let's realize what this song is and how it came about. This song was commissioned by George Preston Marshall when he brought the Boston Redskins to Washington in 1937. And he had a 110-piece marching band, wanted to have, quote, the pomp and circumstance and pageantry of a parade. He was a showman, and he wanted to do this. And he wanted a song. And Barney Breeskin was the band leader, and he was supposed to come up with the music. And George Preston Marshall, who was a racist, and all references have been removed from the team and the organization. He had his wife write the lyrics. And the lyrics included, Fight for Old Dixie. Not Fight for Old D.C., that was changed later on. Fight for Old Dixie, which clearly had to go, but they held on to the Native American imagery. And even in this new song, the original line had, Scalp 'em, swamp 'em, we will take 'em, big score. It's later been changed to Beat 'em, swamp 'em, touchdown, let the points soar. I think the swamp in there brings up Native American imagery to me. They're also looking for a mascot. Chief Z, the guy who used to dress up in a buckskin outfit and a full headdress. He died some years ago. I guess he was the unofficial mascot. Now they're going to have something else. It feels like an expansion team to me. Just give it a fresh coat of paint, everything, change everything. Don't just change the sign on this failed restaurant here, and that's what you're doing. Just the whole Redskins to Commanders. It's more syllables. It's harder to do. It's like those songs that you used to make up in junior high school, just to fit, to taunt somebody or whatever it was. It's terrible. It's just more of what they do. It's just more of what this organization does. And like when they were feeling a pinch, they had to and they go to this well all the time, where they have some type of tribute to Sean Taylor. I think there's a new statue coming up. Hey, look this way. Look over here. Sean Taylor. And so now that they're trying to hang on to something of the past with a fight song that was racist from the beginning, has been spackled over a few times to make it less racist, and now they're taking the name of the team, which does not fit in the. I have no musical ability. I can't carry a tune. I know nothing about it, but doesn't fit in the tune. Just too many syllables. So it's just a sloppy mess. Like everything else they do, just like the tickets to go watch training camp. You know, the Ravens put them online, boom, you apply, you're in. No, here they have a lottery. It's a convoluted mess. And same thing with the fight song. And I guarantee this, when they start playing that song at the games and longtime fans stand up and sing, they're going to sing Hail to the Redskins. They're not going to sing Hail to the Commanders. It just ain't going to happen. And this is somebody's idea of trying to incorporate the past into the new, and it just doesn't work for me. May work for you. Does not work for me. Coming up, the very sad tale of Tony Dow, one of the stars of Leave It to Beaver. That and more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Hour, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Hour on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
We got Tony coming up at 11 o'clock today. I talk about obits here, and plan was to talk about an obit today, but this is a very sad situation. I'm old enough to not have watched the show when it ran out the first time, but in reruns, I watched Leave It to Beaver. And back in the day, when you only had 4 channels, the TV stations, especially during the morning, sometimes early afternoon, until they got into like the news and the prime time, they just ran a lot of reruns. And Leave It to Beaver was a rerun staple. Even though the show went off the air somewhere in the early 60s, maybe the mid-60s, by the 70s, maybe even the early 80s, it was run on network TV. You know, like you tune in CBS or ABC station at 10 o'clock in the morning, and there was a Leave It to Beaver rerun. So my generation got familiar with the show in that way. And the star was Jerry Mathers. He was the Beaver, but he had an older brother who was played by Tony Dow, Wally Cleaver. And this was what America was supposed to be in the late 1950s and 1960s, an all-white neighborhood. The mom who did the housework in high heels and pearls, and the dad who went to work and came home, and the family had dinner, and dad still had his coat and tie on from his day at work, and they would discuss the day. And it was, there was a little bit of drama. Beaver did something, and Wally would call him a squirt, and there'd be something that the dad would have to either discipline them for or give them a life lesson, and it would all end happily, and everybody skipped away, and they done all that. So Tony Dow was the young star of this, young co-star, and he was a very good-looking kid. He'd been a diver, an athlete, and little girls, young girls, really grew up with a crush on him in the same way that my generation grew up idolizing or wanting to meet Marsha Brady, that sort of thing. But he later, as an actor, kind of suffered from that in typecasting, had trouble getting roles, and he ultimately became a director and a producer and had some success. Sadly, he was diagnosed with cancer. He had gone into remission, but back in May, it was revealed that his cancer had come back, and it was terminal at this point. So yesterday on his Facebook post, they had put out a statement that, and this is what it said late yesterday morning. It is with an extremely heavy heart that we share with you the passing of our beloved Tony this morning. Tony was a beautiful soul, kind, compassionate, funny, and humble. And most thought, that he was dead, that he had died of cancer. Well, as time went on, it came out that no, he was in hospice, but he hadn't passed away. So they put out a follow-up Facebook message from his son, Christopher Dow, which reads, "This is a difficult time. Dad is at home under hospice care, and in his last hours, my wife and I are by his side along with many friends that have visited. He has a fighting heart." So This is nobody wants it this way, and the rush to get news out, and online is so different from the news cycle when things get into actual newspaper. That the New York Times had a lengthy obit out on him early yesterday afternoon, and at the moment Tony Dow is alive. It's very sad where this stands right now, and he will, I guess, pass away in the next day or so. But it's just not the way the news flow really needs to work. That's not good. Hey, we got some more information on the Roger Clements incident. Remember the 2000 World Series where Mike Piazza was up at the plate for the Mets, and his bat broke, and it came bouncing back towards Roger Clemens, and as Piazza was running to first base, Clemens picked up the bat and threw it at him. Now, there was history here because earlier that season, Clemens had hit Piazza in the head, and it caused a concussion. And that was after Piazza had homered 3 straight times off of Clemens. So, clearly that was a message fastball that went a little bit too close inside and hit him in the head. So there was all that. Well, now we find out. This is Joe Torre now speaking. He was on an SNY show, which is like the New York version of Masson, and he talked about what happened after that incident. He said the pitching coach Mel Stottlemyre was in his office. He wasn't coaching. He was dealing with multiple myeloma, and couldn't be out on the field. So Roger Clemens comes in and he's crying. Mel later said that he was crying after what had transpired. I guess he was so jacked up about it, and it finally happened that way that he didn't know how to handle it emotionally. I don't know if the steroids had any effect on that. That's just my own personal commentary there. Clemens was eventually forced to bat during a game a couple of years later, and the Mets threw behind his head. But according to Piazza now, there's no bad blood. He ran into him at a golf tournament about 15 years ago, said hi, and I guess life has a way of mellowing you out, so I have no resentment or bitter feelings towards it. But that was one of the oddest World Series incidents with Piazza getting a bat thrown at him by Clemens as he was running to first base. I mean, that was really a bizarre moment and really hard to explain. Brett Favre, his daughter, is on a show called Claim to Fame. I have not watched this. It's an ABC reality show, and it has 12 celebrity relatives living in the same house, but they're not supposed to reveal their identities. So I guess over the course of the show, they're supposed to figure it out. But it's Favre's oldest daughter, Brittany, and she's in the house, and she talks to somebody else named Logan, who's in the house, and she tells this story of Brett Favre when he was driving her to school, and she doesn't say the name of her relative. She's in the show because everybody knows she has a famous relative, doesn't have a last name, neither does Logan in the show. He's a relative of somebody famous. But Brittany tells Logan, my relative, regardless of paycheck, is really cheap. He grew up with absolutely nothing. So he had this old Chevy that he loved, and the muffler fell out. He just chained it to the bumper. So my dad's taking me to school. Every time he hit a speed bump, there was a loud, horrible scraping sound and sparks flying in all different directions. By the time I get in front of the line, they're like, your dad can't afford to fix his truck? And, some habits die hard. I remember hearing this story from Bill McAtee. Bill McAtee had a really good great broadcasting career. He retired from CBS last year, used to do the Masters, and he had a television stint in Kansas City. I initially worked in the same market with him in Beaumont, Texas, but he went from there to Kansas City and later to Dallas and then to the network. He was with CBS for a long, long time. He may have worked for another network as well, but he had a great career. Anyway, he's working in Kansas City, and Lamar Hunt was the owner of the Kansas City Chiefs, and he's doing an interview with him. Lamar Hunt wore glasses all the time. And McAtee says he got totally unnerved during the interview because he looks at Lamar Hunt's glasses, and he sees this billionaire with glasses that have been repaired by a Band-Aid. And he says to himself, that's how people... again, the people don't change, even no matter how much they make. And Lamar Hunt grew up with money, but I guess that they were always very frugal. And he was a guy who was known. When he flew in coach. He didn't fly in first class, things like that. And he was just a guy. Warren Buffett, kind of the same type of guy. He's a billionaire many times over, but doesn't spend a lot of money. And McAtee's telling me he's interviewing this billionaire, and he looks over and he sees the glasses that are repaired by a Band-Aid. You would think Lamar Hunt has, like a box full of glasses if he breaks one, or he has an assistant who he says, "Hey, my glasses broke, go get them fixed, or go get me a spare pair." But nope, he just had glasses broke, repaired them with a Band-Aid, and he just said he couldn't get over that, and that's all he was thinking about during the interview. Probably didn't even listen to the answers. That's how crazy it was for him. And one other thing before we scoot out for Tony, Kirk Ferentz, the Iowa coach, talking about the state of college football, saying, quote, "I think we're in a very precarious place. We don't have a firm structure. We don't have a basic set of operating rules. There's just an overall lack of clarity." Yeah, he's echoing what a lot of coaches are saying. These are coaches who built their programs in a way that is non-existent in college football now. I mean, Kirk Ferentz is 67 years old, and he's been on the job 24 years at Iowa. Pat Fitzgerald, 17 years at Northwestern. He says the game on the field has never been better. Once you walk off the field, it's never been more chaotic. And this has happened in only 1 year. It was July 1st of last year that name, image, and likeness came in, and it changed everything. And where we are a year from now with college football may look totally different than it looks like right now. And right now, it looks totally different than it did a year ago. We'll see how this season plays out, and maybe the on-field product won't matter. But we're heading in a direction of complete chaos, and we need to stop talking, because the Big Ten is now talking about expanding even more, not just UCLA and USC, but they want to add more schools, and they're talking about the academic profile. Stop. It's not about the academic profile. And let's stop making college sports about all the academics, the student athlete. It's about the money that you can make, and it's about the teams that you can put in from the market sizes like Los Angeles, where you're adding 2 teams for what used to be a Midwest conference, until you started looking at the television markets in the Washington-Baltimore area with Maryland and the New York market with Rutgers. Let's stop this student athlete nonsense and make it what it is. It's professional football, it's professional basketball, and these longtime coaches running around like their hair's on fire. Ooh, it's not the same as it. No, it's not the same. It's money. The money has finally become above board rather than a big secret. So there you go. That's where we are with college football, and Kirk Ferentz, get used to it, because it's going to change even more. Tony's coming up next. I'll see you tomorrow and Friday with 2-hour shows. Enjoy the rest of the day. Tony next, ESPN 630.